Okay, so your Chiamo greetings, Yerase. We thank you for tuning in. I'm Odwirafo Kwesi Ranehmbata, Akan Odwirafo of Akwamumaina Maruka, Etifimudi Akwamu Nation in North America within Ojiraman, the purified nation, Afurakani, Afurakaini people, African Black people in the Western Hemisphere. So we're continuing with this series that we started yesterday. We did the Afuraikai, origin of the term Africa, yesterday. That live stream is up on our channel, so you can check that out. We're moving ahead with Amenet and Amen, the origin of the term God. So there's always been misinformation with regard to the etymology and cosmology of the term God and where it comes from. Europeans put forward this false notion that it has proto-indo-european roots, but even they understand that they don't know the origin of the term and so forth. But then some of our people took what they had to say and they continue to perpetuate the misinformation. So in our book, we are the first to prove the actual etymological origin of the term God and its cosmological underpinnings as an ancient title of Amen and Amenet, the great God and great goddess in ancient Kamit and Kamit. So our book Anidaho goes into detail about that. And our book Anidaho is part of our anthology, ODWIRASEM, Trustorical Anthology. So let me show you that. So for some of you who are aware, I've published 31 books to date. We have some more books coming out. The recent anthology we put together is 12 of the 31 books that I've published. So the book ODWIRASEM, Trustorical Anthology, is a 600-page book, 8.5 by 11, full color. And when you look on the back, you'll see that the 12 of my 31 books I expanded recently, and we released this anthology a few months ago, back in the springtime and so forth. So it took 12 of the 31 books that are focused on true historical information and cosmological information, true historical or true historical information, put them all together in one volume. So it's 8.5 by 11 encyclopedia size, full color, 600 pages. You can purchase the book right there. We have a 30% discount for our subscribers. So since you're on our channel, you can get that 30% discount. It's in the chat room, on my page in the chat room, and we'll get to that. But the Anidaho book within the anthology is the book that deals with this piece. So let's get into that. So we use one of the images that's, you'll see we use this in a number of our books in different parts of the website. So if you followed our website, if you've checked out some things, you'll see that we have used this image on more than one occasion. But this is Amen and Amenet. So when I visited Kamit, one of the times I visited Kamit, I took photos of these colossal statues of Amenet and Amen. And you'll see them in the temple of Apet Asediu, which is so-called Karnak. So when you go into Karnak and you walk through and you get to the point where all the pillars are, when you first walk through the gate and so forth, when you go all the way to the back and then you make a left, you will see these two tall, colossal statues about 15 feet tall of Amen and Amenet, the great mother and great father, supreme being. So together, Amen and Amenet function as one unit, which we call the supreme being. There's never been a time when there was just Amen, the great God. There's never been a time when there was just Amenet, the great goddess. It's always been a balance of Amen and Amenet working together, just like your mother and father work together as two halves of a whole, as a unit, to bring you into the world. So that's one image of them. Here is another image of them seated, Amen and Amenet. That is from the temple of Apet Reset, so-called Luxor. Here they are together once again. Now, there's one other, I want to show you a quick going to show you a quick video. And we had a short video that we took second. I'm going to show this video because it's something important. When you see people going to Kamit, they're talking about Amen and Amenet, but very often what they don't talk about actually is Amenet. They talk about Amen, the great father, but many of them don't even know Amenet exists. So I want to show you this video that we took a while back when we were in Kamit a couple of years ago. And it's a short video, but it's just that's important. We're going to point out something that's important. It's taking a minute to come up. Hold on. So when we're in the temple, we wanted to show exactly where Amen and Amenet are. So that's them on one of the temples. You'll see them together on, many of the pillars in the temple of Pet Asenti. And they're very often side by side. Sometimes they're seated. Sometimes you see Amenet by herself. Sometimes you see Amen by herself, and so forth. And you can go from pillar to pillar to pillar throughout that great hall of, pillars and so forth. And you see various representations of Amenet and Amen, Great Mother, Great Father, Supreme Being. In our Khan culture, they're called Inyamewa and Inyame, Great Mother, Great Father, Supreme Being. These are the colossal statues we talked about of them in the back of the temple as they're guarding the gateway and so forth. Now, what's important about that is when you see an image like this. When someone's on a tour and they take you to the temple of Amen, the great temple of Amen, and they say, hey, we're going to Karnak, it's the great temple of Amen, we're going to take you and show you. And they go before a pillar and they show this and they stand right up under the pillar and they show the picture. And they will stand right up under Amen and they'll say, this is Amen. This is where the Christians and Muslims and Hebrews, so-called Jews and so forth, stole the word Amen that they use at the end of their prayers, Amen or Amin and so forth. And this is him, this is who they stole it from. And then people stand up under Amen and take pictures, and then they take them home and show people, this is the God Amen, this is where they stole Amen. So even when you say Amen or can I get an Amen and so forth, you're actually invoking the name of the actual deity Amen. Now, what they don't say is, who is that standing next to him? Because we've been conditioned to denigrate and inferiorize the woman because we've been colonized and controlled culturally, mentally by the whites in our spring, and they inferiorize the female principle and so forth. We end up doing the same thing. Even though we get into quote unquote Afrocentrism and so forth, some of us carry that infection with us. So we don't even stop to look to see who that is. They'll take the picture of Amen and then they go to the next temple. Amenet is the great mother. She's co-equal with Amen. And you see her and Amen in places all across the temple. So what precludes someone from seeing her and just keeping it moving? We've been conditioned to not even ask, who is that female deity right next to him? We've been conditioned to not even ask if Amen is the great God, is there a great mother divinity? We don't even ask that question. Or we'll look at a divinity like Mut or Aset or Nut and just assume, or Neat and assume, oh, this must be the great mother. We don't even investigate. So from the beginning, we've always investigated to show who's who. Now, so we just wanted to show that, to show, what's going on even within our own circles, within our own people who are trying to teach the culture. But it's important that we assess ourselves and make sure we haven't carried that infection from the whites in our offspring into the culture. As we said, our book Anidaho is the book where we talk about the origin of the term God, and let's get into that. Now you'll see the book, this is the front cover of the book Anidaho, and there were 4 articles that we published, and we put all 4 articles, research articles, together in one text. That was the point of this. And part of it was because a number of years ago, people started putting forth this silly notion that the term nigger meant God and it's sacred, and they don't want us to call ourselves niggers because we're taking our divine power away from us if we don't use the word nigger. So nigger is part of our ancestral birthright, which is pure stupidity. So you had people misreading the text of ancient Kamit and putting that forward. And then you had even some elder scholars and teachers repeating that foolishness and trying to create a whole narrative about how the sacred mystery of the word nigger is really divine. Pure stupidity. So what we did is we went into detail showing the etymologies and the cosmologies of these terms and how they don't represent anything divine. Now, so when they talk about, for example, negus or ngesu, ngesu is the origin of the term. Nega, pure stupidity. Negus or ngesu is Amharic, but it comes from ngesu in ancient Kamit. We talked about that. Ra-ka is a title of Ra. It's called Ra-ka or Da-ka, Nan-ka, and so forth. Origin of Naga that has nothing to do with the term nigger and so forth. Pure stupidity. We talk about that. So Naga has nothing to do with the term nigger. And then we get into the beginning of the text where they took the MEDUT and NTORO and tried to flip it around to make it fit a silly narrative. And in the context of proving that, we have to talk about the cosmology and the origin of the term God and Amen and Amen. So this is the term right here. You see in the medutu, the wavy line and the receptacle here, the shrine, and then you have the goose and the swallow bird and the open mouth and the seated divinity shrouded with the beard and so forth. This is where they misread the term. And that's the focus, and then it leads us into the cosmology. Now, when you see this, and if someone doesn't read the MEDUT and NTORO, the hieroglyphs, and because the way this particular dictionary, Budge's dictionary, was written over 100 years ago, he would insert an E in between consonants if they didn't know what the proper vowel placement was. The spelling with the wavy line at the top and the little shrine receptacle at the bottom, the wavy line is the N sound, N, and the little receptacle shrine, as you can see here, is the G sound. So that's N and G. So it means to cackle. Then you have N and 2 G's, to cackle, to quack, talking about ducks. And then you have N, G, A, G, A, the N sound and the ga, ga, to cackle, quack. N, G, A, there's no E actually, cackler. And then this is the portion right here. Ur in ancient Kamit means great or large and so forth. And NGG, the great NGG, the goose goddess who laid the sun egg, and then you have variations of that. So they're assuming that that's saying neg or nigger and so forth. And they're like, oh, well, if nig or nigger means God, then that must mean that that's a sacred term, and they're trying to hide our sacred divine power, and it represents the Kundalini energy and all this stupidity. Because they don't read the text. And we have a 2-part course, MEDUT and NTORO Part 1, MEDUT and NTORO Part 2. Archived 2 6-week courses you can access on our site. I'll put the link up. You can purchase them and go through the online courses yourself to learn how to read and write the language of ancient Kamit and Kamit. So when people haven't done that, they just jump out and start coming up with all kinds of philosophies. The term is actually ga and nga, and the full term is nganga, nganga, but the root is ga. And sometimes it's prefixed with the nasal N in the language. So ga means to cackle or quack. That's the sound that a goose or a gander makes. So if you hear them, hear their sounds, they're saying ga, nga, nga. So they'll say they're honking or quacking. But if you listen to the quote unquote Egyptian goose or Egyptian gander, they say nga, nga, nga. That's how it sounds. So we replicated that with our vocal cords and said that's the sound that they make. So what you have is ga or nga, nga, nganga, and here you have nganga or. Now the proof of that is the variation in the spelling in the language of Kamit. And here it is. Gang, gang, or. We go back up. This is really a variation of that same term. It's simply, instead of ganga, or, it's nganga, nganga, or. That's not nigger, it's nganga is the term. And then or means great. So the great or nganga, the great or ganga. Ga means to cackle or quack, the great goose or gander. Now, why is that important? Because Amen and Amenet, they're sacred animal totems in ancient Kamit, and not only the ram and so forth, but also the great goose and the great gander. Now, and this is the proof. The original term without the N prefix is gan, gan, or, and that N is nasal. So it's gan, gan. Instead of gan, gan, or, it's gan, gan, or. The nasal in Afro-Afrikaans languages is, throughout the languages across the continent. In English, we typically don't use nasals. In Spanish, you'll hear a term like señor, and the N is nasal and so forth. But in English, the nasal is almost, non-existent. But in Afro-Afrikaans languages, the prefixed nasal is very common. So people are used to using those terms. So if you have ga or ganga, you can also say ganga. We know what's going on. Now, so the goose god who laid the cosmic egg, they're talking about Amenet and Amen. But Amenet is the one who laid the egg, of course. Further proof of that is, once again, the variations of spelling. Nganga or. Nganga or. That's not neg gaga. It's the N and the ga. Ga or. Gan or. And then you have, once again, ga or, showing that N is a nasal N. So it's nganga, nganga, and so forth. Now, and here we show that or means great, superior, very much greatness, and urt or urat, the feminine version of great, greatness, all of that. Now we get into the cosmological aspect of why they say what they say. Nga, to cackle, to quack. Nga, a cackler, great cackler. Now, here's the key piece. We just showed you the image of Amen and Amenet in the temple of Apet Asetiu, which is so-called Karnak. That is also the place called Ta Apet, which the whites and their offspring call Thebes. Now, but we call it Ta Apet. Now, in the cosmology of Kamit, as shown in that temple, it's revealed that the great Nganga, the cackler, the goose in the form of the great deity NTORO, Amen, cackles at the beginning of creation and causes the primordial waters of Nun and Nanet to begin to vibrate. The primordial waters of Nun and Nanet within the great black substance of space, Ka and Kaet, ultimately give birth to Ra, and Ra, the Creator and Creatress. So what's happening is they'll show the great spiritual being, Amen. Amen, men means hidden, but it also means stable, permanent, and abiding. So Amen is the great hidden, men, stable, permanent, and abiding, men, being. And Amenet is the great hidden, men, stable, permanent, and abiding being. They're the invisible force that undergirds all of creation. They're hidden, just like the wind. You don't see the wind, but you can feel it. It can blow you around if there's a tornado and so forth. But there's an invisible force that wraps around the entire planet that is unseen, concealed, invisible, hidden, men, but it's also, stabilizing the entire place. So when they talk about Amen and Amenet, the great hidden, being and so forth, stable, permanent, and abiding being, they took the form of a sacred goose or gander. The goose is called Ga or Gaga because that's the sound it makes. For example, in the language of the Akan people, the term for cat is meow. Why? Because that's the sound that naturally emerges from the cat. So we call the cat the meow. Even a child, when they see a dog woofing and so forth, they'll point out and say that's a woof woof because that's the sound that comes from the entity. They'll identify the entity by the sound it naturally organically makes. In ancient Kamit, one of the terms for cat is meow, M-A-U, because that's the sound that comes from the cat. The word for lion is ru, R-U, ru. Why? Because the lion ru or roars. So since that's the sound that comes from a lion, that's the sound that they use to identify that entity. The ga or nga that comes from the goose or gander, that comes from that animal. So they call them, that's a ga or nga. That's what that animal is, a ga. So the great ga, goose and gander, began to cackle at the beginning of creation. And the sound vibrations coming from that cackling or those sound vibrations caused the primordial waters of the black substance of space to begin to vibrate. And they vibrated so rapidly that they generated bubbles, quote unquote, or spheres that exploded into fire and light. And that explosion of fire and light is the creator and creatress Ra and Ra'et, who we talked about yesterday. And they began to spiral through creation as fire and light, carving out circular black spheres. And then their spirit entered into those black spheres and illuminated them. Those black spheres became illuminate black spheres, which are the stars, and the planets come from the stars, and that's the cosmology. So now, to go a little bit further, hold on one second. Okay, so to give a little bit more context to that cosmology in Kamit, you can also find the same cosmology amongst the Bakongo people in their culture. So we said what is key here is that the cackling or quacking or production of sound waves, vibrations, power set in motion, movement, transmission of energy within Nun and Anet and so forth. Now, the Bakongo people are an example. The Kikongo language, the term Nganga means a master, referencing a healer. So Healing Power and Therapy by Dr. Fukiao, the great elder who transitioned a few years ago. I had the honor of being able to communicate with them and, discuss cosmology and so forth when we were doing an event in North Carolina. And he appreciated the work that we were doing as well. So in his book, it says, Ganda, to be initiated, is to join the circle of Nganga, masters, and become oneself Nganga, a doer. Look at what the Kikongo language says. Nganga, of the archaic verbal root ganga. So in the Kikongo language, Nganga is from the archaic verbal root ganga. Didn't we just show that in Kamit? We showed that Ganga, Nganga, is from the root Ganga, as in Ganga Ur. So they said the same thing in Kikongo. Nganga is from the root Ganga, of which the modern form is Vanga, to do, to make, to act, to realize. Is a Mbangi, an individual of deeds and so forth, and all that. So then he says, through Kukongo or Congo, One learns to discover one's own sun or package of life, its power and radiations. And then he talks about once at Kukanga or Congo, the candidate, the one who's being initiated into the sacred rites and so forth, must learn to speak the language of Ki Nganga, a specialized language. Ki means the language Ki of the Nganga. Just like Ki Congo is the language Ki of the Congo people or Bakongo people, where Ki Nganga is the language Ki of the Nganga. It's a specialized language. Now we're talking about the Ganga speech, sacred sound vibrations. Without knowledge of this sophisticated language spoken by initiator masters, one may find it hard to digest the sophisticated knowledge taught in these institutions of initiation. Hold on one second. And then he says, because of the lack of printed material, teaching constituted passing down of key principles of life through bikumu, repeated mottos, and ngana, proverbs. So we just saw the proof in our ancestral languages, because the Bakongo people, just like the Akan people and Yoruba and Igbo and so forth, we migrated from ancient Kamit and Kamit and went to West and Central and South Africa and continued the culture and the language. So just like we have Nganga and Ganga, same thing in the Congo language, then you have these Ngana proverbs and so forth. Now, and we mentioned how the Gan of ancient Kemet is the Kan in Akan and so forth, and Kanche means to utter incantations as a ritual practitioner to affect the spirits and invoke the divinities and evoke the ancestral spirits and so forth. So then you look at the breakdown. Gan, to cry out, to beg, to beseech, petitioner. That's not gen. Remember, it's the G sound and the N sound. In this dictionary, they would stick an E in between the consonants if they didn't know the vowel placement. Later hieroglyphic dictionaries don't include those vowels. They just put the consonants together. They'll just put G and N and just admit we don't know what the vowel is. Well, we know what the vowels are because we still speak the language. It's Gan. So you have cry out, beg, petitioner, a memorial, a record, an archive, Gan, Ganu, records, archives, annals. So when they said the Ngana are proverbs, which are memorializing the teachings of the people and the sacred mysteries and so forth. Well, Gana, Ngana in Kikongo, that's Gan in ancient Kemet, that which is memorialized, the speech that's memorialized. Records, archives, annals, and so forth. Now, when Amen takes the form of the divine goose or gander and cackles, he emits sacred sound vibrations at the onset of creation. The male goose is the gander and the female is the goose and so forth. So the great divinity, the great NTORO Amenet, takes the form of the goose as Gan Urit. So now you have Gan Ur, the great Ur, Gan, reduplicated as Gan Ur, meaning the great cackler, the one who sends out the Gan, the sound vibrations. And the feminine version, the goddess, is Gan Urit. Ur is great masculine, Urit, or Urat is the feminine. Now, so here you have Nganga Ur. Now, then just as an aside, this portion of the article, we showed the origin of the term Negro and where nigger comes from and all of that. And then we show that necro and so forth, and nekur and so forth, dust which is sifted. And then you have the important part of that. The root is nekau, foes crushed or beaten to death. So the root of Negro and necro is neck and so forth, and neka, and that comes from foes or enemies who are crushed or beaten to death. That's the origin of the term Negro, necro meaning dead, Negro, negative, lacking and so forth. All of that, we go into great detail to show Neka is the etymological origin of the term Negro. Foes are enemies that are crushed or beaten to death. So if you call yourself nigger, nigor, any kind of variation of that, you're referencing yourself as the foes or enemies that are beaten or crushed to death. So it's idiotic to try to turn nigger into God. It's pure stupidity. And it shows the brainwashing of our people, how we're still, suffering from trauma. We're seeking to embrace a derogatory term and try to turn it into something divine. That just shows how mentally ill we still are. This is an image from a mural in ancient Kamit. The great goose and great gander together, representative of Amen and Amenet. We talked about the cackling and so forth. So here's the cosmological information from the Temple of Heb, so-called Hibis, columns 23 and 24, and a hymn to Amen. Your ancient throne is the highland. Hold on a second. It says your ancient throne is the highland Kaet of Kemenu. It is from the lake of two knives that you reach land. This is a hymn to Amen. It is from the water surface that you appear in the hidden egg, Amenet being with you. So if you recall, yesterday when we talked about Afuraka, the origin of the term Africa, and we talked about Ka being the highland that rose above the surface of the water at the beginning, and then Ra moved through the primordial land, and Ra'et. When they move through that primordial Ka or Ka at that hill, they become known as Afura and Afuraet. So Afura moving through the Ka is the land Ka of Afura, Afuraka, and Afuraet moving through the Ka is Afuraaka. So that's the origin of the term Africa. Here in the hymn to Amen, they recall that and reference that primordial sacred hill. And they're talking about Amen and Amenet being the invisible hidden power that undergirds not only the water and so forth, but the hill itself. But Amen and Amenet are the invisible hidden concealed power. Ra and Ra'et are born out of them actually as grandchildren of Amen and Amenet. But the key point here is Amen is in the beginning. His ancient throne is the high land, the Ka that's found in Kemenu. We talked about that yesterday. It is from the water surface that you appear in the hidden egg, Amenet being with you. So they're talking about at the beginning of creation, Amen and Amenet are together. So that's important when we talk about female balance, male balance, and so forth. From the so-called Laden Papyrus. Light was his coming into existence on the first occasion, with all that exists in stillness for awe of him. He, meaning Amen, cackled by voice as the great cackler, coming into a land that he created for himself. When it says the great cackler, that final image, ga, or reduplicated as ga, or. When we reduplicate something in Afurakani languages, we give more emphasis to the quality. And we do that even though we lost knowledge on the surface of our language in America. But if someone is, black, they'll call them black, or someone's fat, they call them fat. We reduplicate, or auntie, they'll say TT, Tom, Jojo. We reduplicate terms to emphasize. We've been doing that in Afurakani languages across the board. In ancient Kamit and Kamit, even in the Akan language and others, reduplication, doubling, emphasizes the quality and so forth. So the root is gan, or, the great or, gan. Then you have gan, or. So that's the translation of great or cackler gan. And as you can see, he's the great gan. It says he began speaking in the midst of silence, opening every eye and causing them to look. He began crying out, ga, while the world was in stillness. His yell, his ga, circulated while he had none like him. so that he might give birth to what is and cause them to live, and cause every man to know the way to walk. Their hearts live when they see him. So this is a hymn to Amen, giving his attributes and so forth as the great father of creation. Some of this kind of information ended up in the Bible and Quran, talking about the fictional deities, Yahweh and Allah and so forth. But these praise hymns and so forth are talking about the qualities of the great divinity. Another section, the one who initiated existence on the first occasion, Amen, who developed in the beginning, whose origin is unknown or hidden or concealed. No deity came into being prior to him. No other deity was with him who could say what he looked like. He had no mother who created his name. He had no father to beget him or say, this belongs to me. He who formed in his own egg, power of secret birth, who created his own beauty. So they're just giving the attributes and basically saying there are many deities, but none came before Amen, just like none came before Amenet. So just like your body is the great being, but your organs are smaller beings within the great being and so forth, you're the great being and you give birth to these smaller beings. Amen and Amenet are the great being, and they give birth to smaller beings, which are the deities, the forces in nature that animate the sun, moon, planets, stars, black substance of space. And then they give birth to plant life, animal life, mineral life, and Afurakani, human life. But none came before Amen, none came before Amenet. Now, so we go into some of that cosmology there. But as you can see, this is Amenet and Amen as the great Gan Ur, the great Gan, the Gan Urit or Urat, the great female divinity. Now, great goose and great gander. And we talk about how, the way the geese, stay together their entire lives and so forth. They're loyal to one another, all that kind of thing. Now, you also see the related terms, ga, to sing to a musical instrument, ga or gawa, to sing, to praise, gangar, to sing, once again, emitting sound vibrations, ga. So when human beings do it, it's ga, gangar, and so forth. When geese and gander do it, same thing. Now, why is all of that important? You see this little vessel, ga, a bottle, a wine pot, ganu, plural, metal vases or pots, and you see here the two lips of the pot, and you see that the water is pouring out of the two lips of the pot. That's ga. And then you have the term gash, and you have, once again, the two lips of the pot and the water streaming out. That's the origin of the English term gush. The water is gushing, it's streaming out. So that's gush when it's streaming out, to spill, to pour out, to sprinkle, to be due to a pouring out, an inundation. But just regular pouring, to pour, gaet or gat, and you see that here, that's the term. And you see here, guy, to pour, and you see the pouring out of the lips of the vessel. Now, why is that important? The ritual invocation, ga, ga, sound vibrations to provoke the energy of the primordial waters and so forth, to make things come into being. When you're engaged in ritual invocation, ritual prayer, ritual chant, ga, ga, the sound vibrations are released. They project towards the force of nature. You provoke the energy of the divinity, and then they dispense their energy to you. Just like a child cries out sound vibrations, the sound vibrations provoke the eardrums of the mother, and then she responds by releasing the breast milk to the child. So there's a crying out, a prayer, a ritual invocation. The sound vibrations travel, hit the great being. The baby sees the mother as a great being that can feed it and so forth. Once those sound vibrations hit the great being responds by dispensing life-giving substance to the child to strengthen and fortify and defend the child. When we send our sound vibrations out through ritual prayer and chant, those sound vibrations are projected out. They hit the spirit body of the divinity, and there's a response when they release their divine living energy that replenishes us, empowers us, our consciousness is renewed and so forth. That's what happens. So the release of sound vibrations is a pouring out of sound vibrations from the lips, just like the pouring out of the pot. That's why the same word ga, meaning to pour, like the lips of the pot, is also ga, meaning to release sound vibrations. Now, you had to understand that in order to have an understanding of why the white snare offspring got the origin of the term God wrong. We just gave you the entire cosmology. Now we'll pull it together. We just talked about pouring, ga, and invocation. If you look in the etymological dictionaries for the origin of the term God, you'll see Old English God, supreme being, deity, and so forth. And then it says from the proto-indo-european root, God, that which is invoked. Invoke means to vocalize or vocab, vocalize, to call, vocalize from within, to invoke, and invocations, releasing sound vibrations. If I say a prayer or a chant, that's an invocation, invoking or vocalizing from within. So they say God means that which is invoked. To call, Sanskrit huta, invoked. From the root go or gyo, meaning to call, to invoke. That is to cackle. Go in Indo-European is gan in ancient Kamit, to call, to invoke. The cackling of the great goose is called gan. The sound vibrations coming from the great goose, but also from Amen when he cackles or he gan, invokes at the beginning of creation. Then they say, but some trace it to the proto-indo-european root gu to, poured, from the root gu, to pour a libation, to pour. And then they say also a phrase kuti gaia, poured earth, referring to a burial mound and so forth. Given the Greek facts, the Germanic form may have referred in the first instance to the spirit immanent in a burial mound. That's all that they have. They say some say it traces back to the proto-indo-european root go, meaning to pour. Some say it's traced back to the Indo-European root go, meaning to call, to invoke, to release sound vibrations, ritual invocation. We just showed you that ga means to pour, and ga means to call or invoke, and ga is a title of Amen and Amenet as the great God, the great invoker, great God, the one who pours out the sound vibrations into the primordial waters that get them vibrating, that will eventually give birth to Ra and Ra, the creator and creatress. So go, meaning to pour libation, go, meaning to call or invoke. Both terms are not only not proto-indo-european. As we just saw, these terms are found in the language of ancient Kamit and Kamit that predate the existence of white people on earth. Before they existed on earth, we were already saying ga, ga, and ganga, and so forth. Now, when you look at the nasal N, the great gang, or meaning the great ga, Amen is ga, or meaning the God, or the great God or great ga, literally. You find the same thing in the Akan language, guo, as well as gu in the Akwamu dialect, and guo in the Asante dialect, means to pour, to sprinkle. Guo, guo, to pour, to sprinkle. So if you're pouring libation, shui guo, to pour, or nsa guo, to pour liquor and so forth. Shui gu, to pour libation, like pouring water and so forth. That's pouring libation. And then you have go, an invocation, an announcement before one enters a house, a call for attention. If you go to any event, very often, even in North America, if you go to a Kwanzaa event or any, cultural event, you'll hear the people say, Ago, and the crowd will say, Amen, and they'll say, Ago, and the response is, Amen, Ago, and Amen, that call and response. Ago, can I get your attention? It's a ritual invocation. Ago, and the people say, Amen. That means I am responding, we're aligning with you. You'll see that in various cultural Pan-African, Black nationalist, Afrocentric events that comes from the Akan language and culture. If you go to Ghana, or if you go to some event, if they're trying to get the attention of the crowd, they're ready to start the proceeding, the person will say, Ago, and the entire crowd will say, Amen, and they'll say it 3 times, and then they'll get started. Why do they do that? Ago is a ritual invocation. That's the Go in ancient Kamit, the great cackler, the great Go, the great goose, the great gander, cackling, sending the sound vibrations out to creation. And the response of the people is Amen, literally Amen. You can experience that whether you go amongst some Ghanaians or you look online and so forth, you go to Ghana and so forth, and you get amongst people who speak the language, you will see that ancient ritual invocation. Ago, they're doing exactly what Amen did at the beginning of creation. He said, go, 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 and cause the sacred waters to vibrate. And we say, Ago, to cause the sacred waters of the community to vibrate in unison, and they respond with the name of the deity. Amen. So, now we should also mention that the term, quote, is mispronounced netter, is NTORO. NTORO is pronounced in the Akan language, still pronounced and so forth, NTORO. The feminine is NTOROT. So they often, in this dictionary, they write as netter, netterit, and so forth. That's the origin of the term nature. So NTORO is nature. The, God of nature and so forth, but that's NTORO masculine, NTORO feminine. Now we show a chart. In Kamit, it's NTORO, or NTORO deity. In the Akan language, we vocalize it as it also means deity. In Vodun, they say Trowo, that means deity. So in European culture, they corrupted Ntur into nature. In Kamit, Ga, to invoke. In Akan, Go, to invoke, invocation. In Europe, Go, to invoke. Same terms that they stole from us. In Kamit, Gai, pour libation. In Akan, Go, pour libation. In Europe, Go, pour libation. Now, and then we also happen to mention that, negus is ngas in Amharic, that comes from ngas in ancient Kamit, nkasa, ngasa, ngasu plural, is still nkoso in Akan, ngoso in ancient Kamit, ngasa, which later became ngasa, negasa, but ngasa in Amharic, which means sovereign and so forth. Some people trying to say negus or negus means, is the ordinal term, nigga meaning God, pure stupidity is from ngasa, ngasa, that's where it comes from. And Raku, Oraka becomes Daka or Nanka. We find that in the Akan language. And that Nanka is a serpent and so forth. That comes from Ra, Aka, Daka, Raka, Nanka. And that Nanka in Akan, meaning a title of Ra himself, is Naka or Nanga or Naga in India amongst the Dravidians and so forth. That's not the origin of the term Nigga, it has nothing to do with that. It's pure stupidity. So we show those things in the Akan language. Ga, Kamit, Go, and Akan. NTORO and Kamit, NTORO and Akan. Hasu, and Kasu, and Kamit and Akan, and so forth. And we also show, just to pull it together, one of the terms for stream in ancient Kamit, as you can see here, is ger, ger. In amongst the Tuareg people, the great river that's called the Niger now, the Niger comes from ger, geren, the river of rivers, because it's a great, huge river, the Niger River. So they call it ger, geren, the river of rivers. That's what the Tuareg people call it. When the Tuareg people in that region of West Africa use the term ger, meaning river or stream, that's derived from the ancient language ger, meaning stream. Ger, geren, river of rivers, geren or nger became nger, and the Europeans said neger or nedger or niger and so forth. That's not the origin of the term nigger as well. So once again, when people just grab these things and they have absolutely no knowledge whatsoever of linguistics, they come up with idiotic etymologies and like, Niger is the origin of the term nigger. That means that we niggers, and pure stupidity. And once again, the root of it is, if you're still traumatized by racism, you still have self-hatred, you seek to preserve that self-hatred, you don't want to let it go, so you're going to continue to try to hold on to the name nigger and try to make it something because you don't want to let it go. It's like someone making excuses saying, well, actually, crack cocaine is good for you. It gives you energy and makes you more alert and so forth. They're traumatized by the drug. It's destroying them inside. And instead of letting it go and breaking free from the addiction, they're trying to justify what they're doing so they can keep using it. That's mental illness. So at the bottom, and then we'll answer some questions in the chat room if you have any. I just want to sum it up with this. And this is what we say at the end. Afurakainu Africans who have accepted the false concept of what a god or goddess is from the white snare offspring have been spiritually corrupted. The association of the supreme being with fictional white characters such as Jesus, Yeshua ben Pandera, Muhammad, Abraham, Isaac, Ishmael, Jacob, Esau, Moses, Aaron, Solomon, Sheba, Menelik, Buddha, Brahman, Yahweh, Allah. None of them existed of any race or any form, and we prove that in our book, Kuku Tum, which is part of this anthology. That was designed to emotionally coerce Afurakainu Africans to embrace self-hatred. Such self-hatred manifests in Afurakaini people foolishly attempting to trace their lineage back to these fictional characters, to blacken up these fictional characters, insert themselves into non-existent clans and tribes of these fictional characters. We have misguided individuals calling themselves Hebrews or Moors or Muslims, Christians, Buddhists, Taoists, Hermeticists, Yogis, Nuwapians, 5%ers, Aboriginals, Masons, children of Mu, extraterrestrials, all kinds of idiocy. That self-hatred and manifests in the insane quest of such individuals to embrace and or manufacture contorted, absurd, and totally inaccurate and baseless rationalizations to force nigger or nigga to mean something sacred or divine, yet internally, psychologically, these individuals are actually seeking to hold on to the denigrating title given to them by the white slave because they really accept it as their identity. And it's the same thing that another manifestation of that is people, Black people referring to themselves as God, because we have adapted or accepted a false definition of quote unquote God from the whites and their offspring, and in turn have an inferior reflection of ourselves in relation to that false definition. We then seek to compensate by attempting to de-inferiorize ourselves through claiming that the black man is God or the black woman is God and so forth, that's idiotic. You have plant life, animal life, mineral life, human life. There's a role for plant life, there's a role for mineral life, there's a role for animal life, there's a role for the onipa, the human being, talking about Afrikani people. We have an actual role in creation, just like the deities have a role in creation. The fact that you seek to call yourself God is because you believe that you're inferior, because the whites and their offspring told you you were, so you want to seek to make yourself not inferior. So if you say, well, if God is the greatest thing, I'm just going to call myself that. That makes me feel good. It's idiotic. The reality is you're not a deity, you're a human being. The forces in nature that animate the planets, sun, moon, stars, they have their own role in creation. And there's an actual sacred role of the human being, the onipa in creation, the black human being specifically and only. But if you don't know anything about that, because you don't know anything about your culture, you think the human being is inferior. You don't want to associate with anything inferior, so you're like, I'm God. That's just idiotic. It's just childish and it's idiotic. But this is the psychological explanation of why we leap to such false definitions. Okay, so as we can see, Amen is the great Ga, the great cackler, the one who invokes at the beginning of creation. Amenet is the great Gan Gaet, the great cackler, and Ga, the invoker, the cackler, the one who releases sound vibrations, energy, the set in motion creation. The great Ga is where you get the great God from. Until we put this information out, there was nobody who gave the proper definition of the term. They simply repeated what the whites and their offspring had to say, misinformation, and ran with that. And you have people today still saying, well, we don't use the term God because that's a Germanic term. In reality, it's not. It's just a corruption, a slight corruption of our ancient term. So, hold on a second. All right, so that's what I wanted to share today. If you have any questions, of course, you can post them in the chat room. I want to share a couple of things with you. So, as we said earlier, that Anidaho book is one of my 31 books. I published 31 books to date. Our recent book that we published, ODWIRASEM, Trustorical Anthology, is a 600-page text, and it includes 12 of the 31 books, and you see the 12 books on the back. And one of them, which is this one, is the Anidaho book we just read from. So it's 8.5 by 11, full colors, a 600-page encyclopedia-sized book. We have posted it in the chat room. You can purchase that book now. And we just gave a summary of this cosmology in the book, but it is very detailed. When you read through that, that was just one segment that we gave you, the summary of that. But you can access that book. That's the link in the chat room for the book. And let me show you the other part of that. I'll show you some of our classes. So that's the Nhoma page where you'll find the book and you'll see the video where we talk about the book. And when you click on the hold on a second, you can get the book in the Square platform. There's an option for you can pay in 4 payments. So when you check out, you can choose the option to pay in 4. So instead of paying the full price up front, it's $44 plus shipping, which is $52 total. But you can choose to pay in 4, and therefore you only have to pay $13 today. And then, you make the other $13 payments over time. But just to order the book, you would only pay $13 today. So that's an option. Hold on a second. Okay. So you'll see that on the page. You'll see that's an option on the page. Now, one other thing we want to show, we have an upcoming group healing ritual that's coming up this Sunday. It's the fourth part of a four-part series. So that is Sunday. You'll see the Asase Day, the earth element. So we did the Mframa Day last week, which is the air element. So we talk about the cosmology of these elements. Nsuo, which is water, Mframa, which is air, Asase, which is earth, Oja, which is fire, and the Abosom, the divinities associated with that. And we talk about that in the context of our physical health, these forces within our physical bodies, culturally, spiritually, and so forth. And then we talk about the cosmology first, and then we engage in a ritual susu. Susu is the ancient term for quote unquote meditation. So we engage in a ritual susu. And in this week, since we're dealing with Asase, the earth element, will be invoking Asase. Asase Afu is the fertile earth mother. Asase Ya is the barren earth mother, and so forth. They're called Asase Nebet Tepet in ancient Kamit and Asase Nebet Pet in Akan. They're Asase Afu and Asase Ya. In Yoruba, they are Onile, the fertile earth mother, Orisha, and Yewa, the barren earth mother who governs the cemeteries and so forth. So all across the continent, wherever our people are, there's the fertile earth mother and the barren earth mother and so forth, twin sisters, but we're dealing with the earth element. It deals with the physical body and health and immunity and strength and purification and so forth, and groundedness. So we'll be doing invocations with regard to that. So you'll see that, the Aseti page. When you click on that, let me put that link in the chat room right quick. So you can see that there, and you can see the archived, you can have access to the archived presentations and ritual meditations that we did with the other ones. We also did a series on the sacred Achene. We did a 4-part series on that. Achene Asase, which is sacred mineral totems. Achene Dria, sacred animal totems. I'm sorry, sacred plant totems. And then we had Achene Bois, sacred animal totems. Achene Nipa, sacred human totems, and so forth. And then we had the Ojade, fire element, and Sude, water element. Last week we did Mframa Day, the air element, and this Abusida this Sunday is Asase Day, the earth element. Now, and you'll also see that we have our meditation instructor certification course. We have the archive version and the live version, so you can become, and that's on the same link right here, the PayHip link on the bottom of the page. 4-week course, whether you did the live course or the archive version, which is 50% off. Where we send you all of the videos and the books and so forth. You go through the information, the 4-week course, and then when you're ready, we do a Zoom and go through the information in detail, and then we give you your certificate. And we certified 57 individuals over the past over the past year and so forth. And since then, we've had these individuals are using their certification to go to, corporations, schools, human services organizations to conduct meditation sessions and get paid for that. Typically, they'll pay you $100, $200 to do a half-an-hour session with a group of employees or a group of students or people at a human services organization. And people have group therapy and things like that, and they bring you in and do a little meditation session with their group and so forth. But when you have that credential, you can generate income using that. So we've been teaching Susu meditation from the original Afrikani perspective for the past 20 years, practicing for 30 years, but teaching and publishing on it for 21 now. So we put that experience into the course. And you'll find the same thing on this page. You can order the book on this PayHip page as well. And you'll also see some of our other products and so forth. We just did the presentation on overcoming seasonal depression rooted in our culture, Ahosain. We had a 4-week course on that, and the 4-week course and the books are included. The discounted rate is $10 for that 4-week course. The free book downloads are part of that. So you'll see a number of different things that we have on the site. Okay. Okay, so if there are no questions, we're going to go ahead and end it here. Once again, Yerase, we thank you for tuning in, and Yebeshabio, we will meet again. That's it. Yachirmo, that means greetings. I just wanted to give a quick update. You'll get the details in the clip that follows. I just wanted to show everyone. So my soft cover book, ODWIRASEM Trustorical Anthology, is now available. It's live on Amazon, but we also have a 30% discount when you order directly through our website. As we said before, in some of the postings and information we sent out, you know, Amazon takes 60% off the top for booksellers on their distribution site and so forth. So we can offer it at a 30% discount, you know, on our website. So you'll get the information in the clip that follows, but 8.5 by 11 size, 600 pages, full color, and we go into detail about various aspects of Afurakani, African ancestral religion, culture, nation building, true historical information, spirituality, cosmology, and every facet of Afurakani, African Black identity, and so forth. So check out the clip that follows. We look forward to connecting with you, and Yerase, we thank you for your support. ODWIRASEM Trustorical Anthology. This is a collection of 12 books in one volume written by Odwirafo Kwesi Radnehmpata Akan. This 600-page anthology is comprised of 12 books within the 31-book corpus published by Odwirafo, which focus on trustery, cosmology, ritual, identity, and nation-building restoration for Afurakani, Afurite people, African Black people, wherever we exist in the world. Included within this anthology is the origin of the fictional characters Jesus, Allah, Yahweh, Buddha, and more. The etymology of the term God in the language of ancient Kamit, quote-unquote, Egypt. Origin of the term Afuraka, Afuraitkayet, Africa in Kamit. Etymology and cosmology of religion and spirit in Kamit. Ankh and Kara, the origin of the terms yoga and chakra in Kamit. Afurakani, Afuraitkayet, African Black origin of civilization. Divine order in Afurakani, Afuraitkayet, African cosmology. Ritual in Afurakani, Afuraitkayet, African ancestral religion. Nature of the soul as divine consciousness in Akan cosmology. More means dead. Male-female complementary balance in ancestral religion. Ancestresses, ancestors, goddesses, gods, biology, geology. Racial exclusivity in ancestral religion. Spirigenetic inheritance. Divine prohibition against dissexuality, homosexuality in Kamit. Black nation building, restoration, rooted in ancestral religion, and more. This anthology was curated to function as a volume that will positively transform the mind of any Afurakani, Afuraitkayet, African Black individual, youth, or adult who receives it. We examine every facet of Afurakani, Afuraitkayet, African identity, empowering readers to transform their minds and thus transform their condition wherever they exist in the world. Special 30% discount for our subscribers and followers. see our website to order now. Yerase.